there's so much misinformation that your decisions as an investor, and you have to be intentional with this and be cognizant and aware of this. It's only going to be as good as the data and information that you base it on. You know, and this is good to know from an investor psyche, is you're being marketed to. So in a world that's so crazy with so much stuff going on, how do you catch attention? Well, you have to make crazy statements just to get attention. I mean, there's some folks that were suing the federal government on mandates before it was even like out there, just to insert themselves in the conversation. You need to be aware of this mentally, and don't pay attention to any of that. Don't get sucked into any of that. Keep a calm, cool head. Look at the marketplace for what it is. Look at the economy for what it is. Focus on your craft and what you're doing. And when you do that, you're going to see so many opportunities that the majority of people, I would probably say 99% of the people, are not going to be able to see that.
You know, there's just so much out there. It's, you know, people are looking for, you know, kind of how to put a positive spin on that. And as an investor, you really have to, you know, you're going in, you're looking at the trends, you're following the trends, you're getting ahead of those trends. That's when you can really make, you know, substantial wealth, is when you know, get involved in something before the masses do, of course, right? So what, you know, what kind of trends are you seeing out there right now? What are you really following, and what direction do you see that those are going, and how are you trying to position yourselves out in front of them?
Yeah, I would start with the first thing that you need to do as an investor, and this will really help you. And I know a lot of folks have, in some way, shape, or form, hit on this, but it's so important that everything starts with you. The risk is never in any investment or in a market. The risk is in the investor. And I know, again, it sounds like a cliche, but it's so important. The fundamentals, the basics, it's you. So make sure in 2022 that you're mentally, spiritually, and physically as strong as you've ever been. So what I mean by mentally strong is understanding, you know, that you're the asset, developing that, number one, but also work on different intelligences. An intelligence that's going to serve you in 2022, just as it would have served you in 2020, is emotional intelligence. And what I mean by that is, you know, we get very emotional. We're emotional human beings. That's why we cry in movies, and we get all, you know, happy when we listen to music. That's just
you might cry in movies. I don't cry during movies.
Just I bawl my tears out. All the Disney movies with my kids, I bawl my eyes out. No, so we're emotional beings, and you have to understand that, be aware of that, because if you are aware of that, then all of a sudden you can intentionally focus on not being pulled emotionally into certain areas. So as an investor, I can't think of a bigger advantage that you could have is increasing your emotional intelligence, because the trends that I'm seeing is it's going to be very chaotic. I looked at 2020 before any of this happened. And in 2020, I said it was an election year. It feels like every year is an election year in the US, right? Or in the world, for that matter. But it's an election year, which means that it's going to be chaotic. And there was a lot at stake in 2020. So I looked at 2020, I said election year, presidential election. There's going to be, the emotions are going to be through the roof. There's going to be a lot of divide and conquer, divisive stuff, right? The media, turn that stuff off. Doesn't serve you at all. Don't get sucked into any of that, regardless of what channel it is. So there's going to be a lot of that going on, because they want folks emotional. Because if you're emotional, you don't think clearly, you don't make good decisions. So it's going to be, that's the environment that investors are going to be in. And again, in 2020, same thing, election year, a lot at stake. We're already starting to see the divisiveness and the tactics on both sides. And they do that because it works. It works. So they're going to get people emotionally and get you sucked down rabbit holes. And it's the same thing with markets. You know, it's almost like financial news has adopted, you know, this mainstream strategy of news. I look at stuff and it's just fear-driven, fear driven. What's the Fed going to do? Oh, are they going to raise rates? Are they not going to raise? It's almost like I'm watching ESPN, right? When you're watching financial news. It's like, oh my goodness, is Tom Brady going to start? His hamstring was tight the last time I checked. You know, down on the touchline is this person. What do you think about Brady's hamstring? It's essentially that type of tactics within the news. And
how's Jerome Powell's knee doing this morning, right? I mean, basically the same thing.
Exactly. So a lot hinges on that. And then, you know, every other person also from a marketing standpoint, you know, and this is good to know from an investor psyche is you're being marketed to. So in a world that's so crazy with so much stuff going on, how do you catch attention? Well, you have to make crazy statements just to get attention. I mean, there's some folks that were suing the federal government on mandates before it was even like out there, just to insert themselves in the conversation, right? In the investment world. But essentially, you need to be aware of this mentally and don't pay attention to any of that. Don't get sucked into any of that. Keep a calm, cool head. Look at the marketplace for what it is. Look at the economy for what it is. Focus on your craft and what you're doing. And when you do that, you're going to see so many opportunities that the majority of people, I would probably say 99% of the people are not going to be able to see that. So that's a trend. The first thing is political election. The second thing that I'm seeing is inflation. Inflation. It's not going away. It's not going to get any better because essentially, you know, where we are right now, the central banks have their backs up against the wall. They've cornered themselves. So will you see rate increases? Nothing meaningful. They can't do it. And if they do that, there's going to be a quick response in all markets. So I see inflation still being a trend, and there's ways to play it, obviously through real estate and through different assets. You know, and the other trend that I would also say is disruption. And what I mean by disruption is, well, have you been to the grocery store lately? Supply chain disruptions. It was bound to happen. We've been talking about this for quite a bit. When we literally shut down the world's biggest economy by pressing a button saying 2 weeks to slow the spread. And then since then, it's been stop, start. Some areas, yes, have opened up and their economies are booming. You know, Florida, one great example of that, right? Texas, you know, folks are moving to those states too. I mean, Austin, look at what's happening in Austin, just in Texas. So yeah, there are some areas that plugging along, but for the most part, and we're so connected, I mean, so interconnected, and supply chains are going to be disrupted, which will disrupt everything, supplies, food supplies. And then of course, another theme in the disruption was the mandates. Yes, it went to the Supreme Court and they made a ruling, and folks think, yeah, that's not really something to pay attention to, but there's an effect, which when something happens, it's like a ripple effect, right? That ripples through the economy. So sometimes when something happens, before it even went to the Supreme Court, there was a lot of disruption already, a lot of disruption in corporations, services such as law enforcement, you know, the firefighters, healthcare, and so forth. That impacts the economic environment that investors operate in, because all of a sudden, I mean, it was, and again, the numbers, it's tough to get accurate data these days because there's so much misinformation. But let's just hypothetically say a third of your workforce in certain areas essentially stopped working and is no longer there. Well, then how does that affect your hospitals? Pretty much affects it big time. How does that affect law enforcement? How does that affect corporations, businesses, and so forth? So there will be disruption, but again, starting with a cool, calm head, mentally, spiritually, and physically strong as you can be, you're not going to get sucked into the narratives. You're just going to see it for what it is, and then you'll start to see the opportunities as they arise within the economic environment.
Yeah, and just to kind of go back to what you said earlier, we love to give, you know, resources here to our channel audience. You mentioned, or you kind of touched on some newsletters that you subscribe to that kind of paint both sides of the picture, if you will, so that people are getting kind of an accurate depiction that's unbiased, you know, really by the time they're doing the research, and they can take facts and do their own kind of critical thinking and, you know, go down that rabbit hole and come out on the other end kind of having a little bit more information. What are a couple that you would recommend? Now, you said some of them are paid. I'm assuming there's not some, you know, massive charge to get involved in those, but if you could rattle off maybe 2 or 3 of your favorites that our folks can research and possibly, you know, sign up for.
Yeah, there's, for example, so I mentioned shadow stats from John Williams, and that's specific economic data. So you'll understand what the real rate of inflation is. It's funny, John Williams published, I would say almost 8 months. He was saying the rate of inflation at that time was at 12%. It's gone up since. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, you have Paul Tudor Jones, Kyle Bass, all these Wall Street guys coming out and say, well, the real rate of inflation is more like 12%. And I'm like, I read that 6 months ago, in John Williams's newsletter. So he's great. Then there's also fantastic information put out by people like George Gammon, Lynn Alden, Chris McIntosh. They have their own little, they all have separate newsletters that I consume. You know, there are different, I would say that's more of like market specific and so forth. Real estate, there's a lot of great channels such as this one. If you want to know what's going on in real estate, talk to people that are doing it, such as Michael and everyone on this channel that he interviews. You know, just writing about real estate sometimes, and I think you probably think the same way too. When you read in the newspaper about it, you're like, none of these people are actually investing in real estate.
None of them are doing deals. You can tell pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say for real estate, that's the best way to do it. You could get great economic data and trends. And that's another subscription is the Trends Journal from Gerald Celente, which has been the trend forecaster. I've been subscribing for that for about 20 years. He's been way ahead of all this stuff, just giving you data. Because news, I mean, in the past, you just want to know what's going on to make decisions on it, right? I don't want to hear someone else's take or spin or something on that. So just give me the data. Tell me the news of the things that I need to know of. And those are some of the things that help you. For real estate, talk to people that are doing it, that are in the markets, because it changes pretty quickly. So I don't have newsletter subscription for real estate. I just talk to folks such as yourself to figure out what's going on, what does the market looks like, because there's no better information. And I would say this to your audience too. We're at a time right now where, you know, the term fake news is now, I mean, it's almost old. It's been around, but there's so much misinformation that your decisions as an investor, and you have to be intentional with this and be cognizant and aware of this. It's only going to be as good as the data and information that you base it on. So it's very, very important, because I see some of the things that are presented out there. The example in our conversation today is the transitory inflation. Folks, if you knew the real rate of inflation and you knew that it wasn't going away, you would have made different decisions. Let's just say for the person that said, oh, they said it's going to go away, you know, no, don't worry about it. So you want to have real accurate data and information at this point in time of the market cycle.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really astute. And we do a ton of research on behalf, you know, of our audience, and obviously bring experts like you here on the channel. But we always, you know, talk multiple times throughout each one of these videos. Go out there and do your own research, folks. Be a critical thinker, poke holes, you know, figure out the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's always going to be, or typically going to be a flip side to every coin. But ultimately, when you're doing that research, you can draw your own conclusions from that. We're always going to encourage people to do that. You know, make up your own mind, get as much data, surround yourself with like-minded folks, surround yourself with experts, and then make informed decisions. So no, I think that that's spot on. So you obviously digest a ton of this information. You rattled off a couple of newsletters that our folks can take a look at. We certainly appreciate that. But MC, we're going to go ahead and draw to a close. If you don't mind, we're going to continue to bring you back here on the channel periodically and share your wealth of knowledge. Obviously, you know, times are going to continue to change, and we'd love to get your input and have you weigh in on some of this. So guys watching from home, Smash that thumbs up button below. If you love this content, you want us to continue to bring people like MC on the channel. If you're not a subscriber already, go ahead and ding that subscribe button and that bell notification. That's going to give you the heads up as we bring more great content on the VIP Financial Education YouTube channel, where we talk about all things credit, capital, and cash flow. Until next time, take care and make it a great day.